Hello colorists, it's Jody here. Welcome back to the channel where we do some strange comparisons on all of our coloring mediums. Today we are continuing our two-part series on crayons. I am looking at 8 different crayon brands made of various materials. So this is the second and last in this series. The number of videos was voted on using the poll in my community tab, so watch out for polls because that's where you as fellow colorists get to select how we're doing and running the channel. So let's get into it. We have 4 additional brands that we're going to be covering. We have the Jot brand from the Dollar Tree, and this is a neon 10 set. We have 32 Cra-Z-Art crayons, again from the Dollar Tree. We have Faber Castell erasable plastic crayons. And then we have the Excuse the Glare Caran Neo Color 1. So these are the artist grade. So we've got from the very cheap to the very expensive in this series. We're covering all the brands. So no matter your budget, you will be able to find a crayon that works for you. This is the results from our coloring that we did in the first installment of this series, where we colored with the Azafran, the Bambino, the Crayola, and the Deli. So these ones were made with soy wax, these ones were made with clay, these are wax crayons, and these were plastic crayons. So we've had quite the variety already. Let's get started. We're going to start with the Faber Castell 25 erasable crayons. So let's pull those out. They come in a paper box. They are for 5 and up, so definitely everyone on my channel, you qualify. They come with their own eraser. They are a non-wrapped crayon. They are the smallest crayon that we have. So we've been using the standard Crayola crayon. Let me just grab one. So size comparison to a Crayola, you can see that it's quite a bit different. For everything from triangular barrel, and it's quite a bit smaller than the Crayola, and size-wise also at least an inch smaller. So it's quite a tiny crayon. They do feel fairly sturdy though. They feel a little bit sturdier than the Bambino, although they are smaller than the Bambino crayons. They come with their own eraser, and this eraser is actually one of 2 erasers that I was using as part of my test. So let's get looking at the swatches. I use the Coloring Bliss Swatch for Fun book for these type of swatches where there are no color names and no numbers. So here is the swatch. I did a single layer of pigment over the entire spoon area. Then at the end of each spoon, I tried some Gamsol blending. And then on the head of each spoon, I took the eraser that was provided and tried and did an eraser test. And I did that specifically on these swatches because that is one of the features of these crayons, is that they are erasable. And indeed, they did erase quite well. The orange was a little bit hard to erase, but that's also a hard color. So, and this was with 1 layer. So I didn't do a bunch of burnishing and then try and erase, because obviously that is not a fair test. So they were decently pigmented, not super pigmented, but they did go down. I then on each brand of crayon, I use the Chris Rainiac Morning Scribbles coloring book. It's the 50 pages of monster doodles. It is Amazon printed paper, so that's why I use this book. each crayon brand received their own page, and then on the page itself I tried a variety of different. So I used a Prisma blender up here. I used a Caran full blender along here, and that did quite well. This area here is not blended. It is just two different colors of crayon itself. And I blended with Gamsol for the eyes. And then of course this is not blended down here. Cute little guy. The crayons went down fairly easily. I didn't have problems getting the pigment off of them. They are another plastic crayon similar to the Deli, so I was a little concerned because the Deli were quite a hard pencil to get pigment from. If I can find the Deli, this was the Deli page here, and it was just, you had to push fairly hard. So that didn't have that here, but let's take a look now. We have a crayon comparison sheet here, and what I've done is for each brand I go over the brand, obviously, where it's made, how many I own, where I purchased them. Then I do a color just to see how they go down on paper. This is a good quality cardstock, so better than the Amazon printed paper that I used for the full page coloring. Then I do an eraser test, and I use first my Tombow mono eraser and see if it worked, and then I came in and actually used the Faber Castell eraser that is quite a bit tougher than my mono eraser, and it actually worked better for all of the brands using that eraser. So the sturdy eraser seemed to do a better job. Then I do a bunch of blending tests. I use odorless mineral spirits, then I use a Prisma colorless blender. So my odorless mineral spirits is in my Copic Sketch empty marker. I then use a Prisma Premier colorless blender that you would normally use for an alcohol marker. I used a Caran full blender stick, and then I used some heat. So for the heat, I don't have a actual heat gun. I used my hair dryer, full disclosure, and I also used a paper stump. And then at the end, I kind of say whether they were fun or frustrating. So let's go and show you the results from the Faber Castell. So first off, the Faber Castell are they're plastic crayons. There's 25. They are made in India. I purchased them off of Amazon. I had not even seen them before, so I was surprised to find that they actually had some, and I was quite excited because most Faber Castell products are quite high in pigment. So they were fine. They did erase. They did dissolve with the odorless mineral spirit. They did not do much blending though. A little bit, but not. They still stayed. Basically, the odorless mineral spirit was able to dissolve, but not blend. The Prisma blender did dissolve it. The full blender was able to actually brighten the color a bit when you compare it to the heat, and it did blend well. And the heat, it lightened it, and it worked, but it still left some pencil marks, so it didn't work. So obviously there isn't a lot of wax in these because it didn't melt out. So I was like fairly disappointed actually in both the plastic crayon area. So that is them. But let's color in front of you and see what you think. I'll zoom you in a little bit, and we will do one of these petals. We're going to do this petal here, and we're going to try a few colors. Take a look at the color range again. Let's start with purple. So this is purple, and it's not a lot of pigment, or it's not a dark purple. And when I start to do more than one layer, the same thing that was happening and I'll just try and lightly blend upwards, and then I'll show you. It starts to get little plastic dust particles on it. So you can see them here, and what happens is if you brush them over your page, you start to get smears. So it's definitely something that is not, it gets to be a little bit frustrating because you're going to make marks all over your page if you're not careful. Let's see if we can blend this. It does blend a little better, but not much. It's kind of skating over top, so blending two colors together, not easily done. And we know that when I bring in the odorless mineral spirits, it's not going to travel either. It just dissolves in place. So if you're going to try blending, you do need to make sure you're using similar colors fairly close on your color wheel. So, and again, you can see the addition of more dust. So that is the drawback of the, and what was surprising to me on these plastic crayons. And I just try and go light. So instead of using an odorless mineral spirit or something to do blending, I would variegate or alter the way you're coloring instead. So do lighter at the tip and then a couple extra layers. If I came in with a darker red on top of that, if I'm pushing hard, I am able to get some pigment down, and I am getting more of those dust bits. Not really sure what to call them other than that. So, okay, let's try some blues. Again, if you had just some small areas that you were coloring and you didn't plan on doing some blending and stuff, I think that these would be fine. These are a tough crayon. They don't, like I was worried that I would break them because I was holding them and pushing them hard, but so far they've been quite tough. Let's see what other colors we got here. It's a good example of the ability or non-ability to blend, even trying to go on top of that, you see the dust happening. So yeah, let's see if the black goes over top. So most of those holes are colored in, so it should go fairly easily. And then there's some, so the black's going over top pretty good for the most part. Let's use the Prismacolor blender and I'll show you what happens. Let's try and blend this harsh line out a bit. And this is just kind of skating on top of it. So I guess these are definitely marketed to kids 5 and up, and that's probably where I would leave them. I wouldn't tell you to run out and invest in them to use in your adult coloring books because you're going to be frustrated. The pigment payout, it's not an enjoyable experience coloring with them. these brand over here with, and this brand here. So the azafran made with the soy wax went on more like a pastel and was creamy. So although you were not able to, blend them together with Gamsol, you were able to blend with the crayons themselves more like a pastel. So these ones definitely resist blending. And yeah, so that's all I have to say about the Faber Castell. The eraser does work. They are a cute set. Will I reach for them to do coloring in my books? No. That's pretty easy. Okay, next I have are the Cra-Z-Art. So these are a set of 32 crayons that I purchased at the Dollar Tree. So 32 crayons cost me $1.50. They are made in China. They look exactly like a Crayola. They're actually brighter packaging wise than the Crayola. When I pulled out the Crayola, similar packaging, but let's just get like the same green out. The Cra-Z-Art were just brighter, looked funner than the Crayola, which I was surprised at. So, but same size, same shape, total dupe of them. So let's see how they worked. So far, our largest set of crayons has been Crayola with 64, and this set of Cra-Z-Arts were a 32 set. They were very waxy, but they did blend with the Caran blender pencil, or they were burnished. So we have some darker areas on each flower, and that's where I used the Caran blender pencil. And just to remind you, that's what this is. So we'll look at the swatches. So in each flower there is a section that is darker, and that's where I blended it out. Sometimes it's just a little bit, and then at the tip as well. Other times it was just a little centerpiece. So each flower is a little bit different. Certainly when you used the blender, the pigment became a lot brighter. It was concentrated and pushed into the paper. So it's not that I went over this section a bunch of times. I did it the same amount as the rest, but just blending it and burnishing it into the paper actually brightened it and made that much of a difference. So that was interesting. I'll show you the page that I did. Cra-Z-Art, here we go. This little guy. So I started off on the bottom with the darker blue, and I've got a few shades going up. I also did some Gamsol blending down here, so you could kind of see the difference. This is the same color blue, and then I go into some greens, some more blue, green, lighter greens. I used at the tip here, I used the Caran blender, so you can see that this is a darker green than right here. I used on the pink area, I used the Prisma alcohol blender. For his tongue area, that's the deep, I used the Caran full blender. So the Gamsol did blend, but it didn't get rid of all of the whites in the paper like I would normally see. It did basically dissolve the waxy area and just let it sink into the page for the pigment. It didn't actually blend that I would normally see. It didn't move the pigment around, it just dissolved. And that was the same as when I used the Prisma alcohol blender. So now that we've seen the full page colored, let's go and take a look at how it did on our comparison sheet. So here we go. I bought them 32, like I said, at the dollar store. Dollar Tree, I should say. So this is just a straight color. This is me trying to erase. When I used the Tombow mini eraser on the angle here, it just basically smeared. It didn't erase. It did erase a bit better when I used the Faber Castell eraser, and it's a harder eraser, so that's this line here. So there was a bit more erasing then. The Ownerless Mineral Spirits, it did dissolve. It did dissolve here. This is me trying to mix two different colors. It did mix better than the Faber Castell, but not as well as, say, the Bambino. So there was some mixing here, so that was good. The Prisma blender, the Caran full blender, like I said, it brightened the color up quite a bit. And then the heat, you can still see some crayon marks there. So the heat didn't do a lot to it, but it did, and it kind of lightened it a bit. The heat, I found, lightened all of them. So the heat, applying heat, just, I wouldn't try that. I did try it on a full page for the neon ones last month, but it actually was a bit of a disappointment. So probably heat, won't be spending money on a heat gun at this point. Let's go and take a look at the Cra-Z-Art in color on camera. So that's going to be this here. Pull some crayons out. There are lots of colors, which is nice. Let's do a... This always looks like purple, but it's actually blue. So again, I've been tricked into thinking it's purple. So I will finish this little bit area here, but then I'll go find a purple. So let's see if this one's purple. And it is. So I guess this says blue violet. They do have names on it. And this is gorgeous blue. So I shouldn't have just looked at the wrapper. I should read the actual names. So this is blue violet. It is waxy. As soon as I hit up against the other or go over it more than once, you're getting wax. You can go light, but any kind of pressure, you're immediately getting a wax buildup. So it's a typical crayon, I guess, experience. So let's try and mix a different color. So I went light, so I'm trying light again to try and blend those two together. And that's the trick with crayons, is that you can blend with the crayons. Don't rely on blending solutions for that purpose. I am getting some waxy bits. The wax, when it builds up in wax, the wax sticks to the page, whereas the plastic crayons, the dust moved. So if that makes sense. Let's try a red. There are lots of colors, so that's kind of nice. If you've colored with Crayola, then you know exactly how these go. A little breakage. Wasn't pushing very hard, but apparently there must have been a... There's quite a bit of wax build up there. There's something to be said for the other ones. So when I have wax build up, let's try and blend that out. And what the full blender seems to do is picks up the wax and deposits it on the end of the blender and pushes as much pigment down into the page as possible. So that is one way of getting rid of some of the globby wax bits. But it also, it's hard on your hand. So if it's a hand issue, that might not be something that makes your coloring enjoyable. As soon as you hit the two layers, you're getting wax. And if I use my fingernail, you can see the wax build up. on that. So basically that's what the full blender is doing, is scraping the wax and pushing it into the paper. So I mean, if you don't have a full blender, you'll probably use a nail cuticle pusher thing, and that probably would do the same. Colors are vibrant. The pigment payout is good, so I'm not concerned about that. So they have better pigment payout than the plastic crayons, for sure. But because they gum up so quickly, I probably wouldn't reach for these to do a background on a coloring page. You're not going to get a smooth lay down, and you're not going to be able to blend it out. So I would use this strictly for Amazon type books where you have small areas and not large areas. Okay, so that's how that one's looking. A little bit, well, quite a bit waxy. This area is smooth only because we blended it. If I tried to use the Copic blending solution, just to show you, it's pretty much just skating over this area, so it's dissolving the pigment, dissolving the wax. So if you work at it long enough, you basically are picking up the wax onto the end of your pencil or end of your blender stump. But it can work. Just make sure you cleaning off your blender so that you're not clogging up with a bunch of wax. So on the fun or frustrating, I actually rated these Cra-Z-Arts as fun because they were still fun, but they were probably, you know, more on the line of the Crayola. So fun in that they're a nostalgic crayon, but in my adult coloring books, probably not something I would reach for. Next, let's do the Caran dash. After I close and pick up all of these Cra-Z-Art. Okay, for the artist grade crayons that I included in this are the Caran dash Neo Color 1. These are basically wax pastels, is how they're wax oil pastels is how they're labeled. They are the non-soluble kind, so they act very much like a pastel or a crayon. They are the only artist grade ones in the 8 that I have. They are very expensive. They are light fast, so that's good. You can buy them open stock. This is a 40 set. I'm not sure if this is the largest set of them available, but this was a very expensive purchase. So something that not everybody is going to want to do, and I totally understand that. You can get them in smaller sets. You can get them in 10 and 15 sets. So if that's something of interest, you can use them in conjunction with the water-soluble brothers, the Neo Color 2. So you could use those, the water-soluble ones first, and then come on top of them with these, or just use these on their own. I did do the chart here, and I will also show you the swatch chart in the Bliss swatch book. So I'll just get to that page. So on this page, I used the half circle, so the whole circle is filled in, and then half of it I used the blender pencil on. So you'll see a darker side to each swatch, and that's where I used the Caran dash full blender pencil. So that's this guy. They do have names and numbers on these. You can buy them, like I said, open stock, and they do have light fast ratings. This is the fun swatch that I did. So I treated them like the other crayons. I just did them in here. It's a 40 set, and then half of them I blended with Gamsol on, so about a third, I guess, of it, not half, but so I did the whole box, and then I came in with Gamsol. So they do dissolve beautifully. They're much vibrant when they're dissolved. They do blend. So I expect way more from a crayon where I spent a lot of money on. So it's not exactly a fair comparison to the other crayons, but these are just one set of crayons and I wanted to include them as well. And you may be surprised with some of the results. So here's how they look in their little case. I am leaving them in the tin. This is the page on the Amazon printed page paper that I did. And if you didn't know that these were done with Neocolor ones, you know, you might say, well, that's not much different than this or this. So it is a bit brighter. I did some areas with no blending. I did an area with Gamsol. This was the blender pencil. The Prismacolor didn't do a whole lot. It did dissolve it, but it didn't actually blend. It just dissolved. And that's kind of what I found with all of them. The alcohol blender, well, it worked. It didn't actually do what I wanted to do, where the Gamsol actually blended and moved it. And I would expect that from the Gamsol. So again, this is Gamsol, and this is about 2 or 3 different colors blended together here. And then this is no blending. So quite vibrant even without blending, but once you did blend, a lot more vibrant. And then under here, a few different colors blended together with no blending solution. So that's our little monster. And thanks to Chris Rainiac for having a fun book. That I wanted to use a book that had cheap paper, but also had a big section, because crayons are not for small tiny areas. Crayons work best in big pictured books, you know, where you have, you know, something like that is still fine because you can get a chunky crayon in there, but trying to do like a Joanna Basford page would drive me insane. So if we take a look at how we did on this, first off, the Caran Neocolor one, I have the 40 set. They are made in Switzerland. They are sold on Blick for open stock. They are also sold on Amazon or any art store. Really watch for the price, and be careful if you're looking for the Neocolor 2 versus 1. There's quite a bit of seller confusion on that. They did color like a regular crayon, so when you first lay them down, it's like, oh, what's the big deal? They did not erase well at all. They were probably one of the worst for erasing, which I was surprised at. They were very vibrant when you blended them out. They did blend each with each other, so the pigment actually will travel when you're blending them. The Prismacolor just dissolved it, didn't brighten it. 2 different colors here, I believe. This is the same color, and you'll notice quite a bit lighter here. And this full blender really brightened it up. They were fun to color with because they do go down quite smooth and creamy. So again, they're more like, they're called oil pastels. And let's do some coloring and see what you think. So this is going to be our area. They do have color names and numbers. So this is violet. They don't go down waxy, so they go down a little bit more like a pastel. So it kind of skates over this paper. And mix the two together a bit. And we'll see if I can blend that out. So you can be a little messy. When you know that you can blend something with Gamsol, I tend to be a little messier. So that may be a good or a bad thing. But I'm not, this is like three or four layers now. I'm not getting a waxy buildup. So let's go ahead and show you how it blends. Make sure I have a clean. So I'm going to start with the lightest area. And you can see that you can actually move and drag the pigment around. Crayons that moved pigment around well was the Bambino clay crayons. There you go. So that went from kind of a messy disaster to actually kind of pretty. So let's try a few other colors. Let's try some greens. And if we try and do some blending without the Gamsol, you can build up on top of. So the dark green is lightening up. So you can do a better job of blending, and you're not getting a waxy buildup. So you're not getting clumps of wax, and you're not getting any dust. So that's the difference between an artist grade, one of the differences. Okay, let's try out some reds. Do I have more fun with these than another crayon? Not as much for the price. I mean, I'm really happy I have them. I will be using them in conjunction with my Neo Color 2s. And I will use them definitely in my coloring books. Fun-wise, if you're just doing this for fun, I think that you don't need to spend this much money to have fun. Beautiful art supply. Definitely, you know, lovely to have. Let's see. Effortlessly putting down pigment, so that's nice. Have some light flesh tone colors, so although that's quite yellow, well, it is fleshy once you get, it's called Sahara yellow. So, and another one is called salmon, and I thought that that was kind of a fleshy tone for lighter skin tones, not obviously for all skin tones. There are a number of grays, so let's use a Payne's gray. And it does, you are able to add it on top. So we've already had about 6 layers, plus I've done blending solution, and here I'll use a black. And I am able to still add on top of that. So that's the difference too, is you can add multiple layers. And it does. Crayola still has more of a selection in colors if you're just looking for color selection. I'll zoom you out and you can take a look at the vibrancy of those colors versus some of the others. And if I go like this, you can kind of see the ones that are very waxy. Like this Crayola one is quite waxy, as well as the Cra-Z-Art. And those are the wax ones anyway, so those are what you would expect. So yes, I thought that these were fun to color with, but yes, a very dear art supply. Okay, that's our expensive one. Now let's go and complete with the neon ones. So I was at the Dollar Tree when I picked up the Cra-Z-Art, and they had a ton of Jot ones, and they were all, I checked to see where they were all made. They were all made in Thailand, so I just picked a set that I was kind of piqued my interest, and that was the neon set. At the time I was working on a jellyfish, so I thought that that would be kind of fun if I could use them on that page. Spoiler alert, I didn't end up getting to use them on the page very much. It didn't work. I was working in a Joanna Basford page at the time. Here is the 10 count. So the tip here is blended with the Caran blender pencil. The rest is done just scribbling on the page, swatching. So there wasn't, it's hard to tell, but basically the tips are all lighter, and that's because basically the wax has been scraped off. So these are by far the waxiest crayons that we have. And let's start by showing you, now that you've seen the swatch, we will go ahead and look at the picture. So this is the Jot Neon crayon. I was not able to blend with this. It was going horrible. So I ended up taking my hairdryer and using heat and a full blender. And basically I was heating the page up, getting it warm enough to kind of melt, and then I was using the full blender to try and blend it in and make it smooth. So it is smooth now. It doesn't feel super waxy. I mean, it's waxy down here where I didn't blend it with, so this is like non-blended down here and blended here. The colors did not travel. They stayed where they were. So they just, you know, if you're gonna, like many crayons, wherever you put the pigment is where it's gonna stay. You're not gonna rely on a blending solution to move the pigment. It will just sink into the paper. So these were the most frustrating crayons that I had. These are the only ones that on my page I actually did a frowny face. These cost $1.50 for 10. Okay. We bought them at Dollar Tree. They're made in Thailand. They went on quite patchy right from the get-go. They built up wax. They smeared rather than erased. They didn't really dissolve with the odorless mineral spirit, nor with the Prismacolorless blender. You can see it's still very patchy. The blender pencil, the Caran full blender, burnished it into the paper, but really all it was doing was scraping the wax off, so it left it quite light. And this is totally smooth and non-waxy here, so it did dissolve, but really the wax all ended up on the tip of my blending stump. So definitely poor for pigment, way waxy. The crayon itself is quite a big, chunky, substantial crayon. No names or numbers, which is fine. It's paper covered, showing you the size against a Crayola. So it is quite a chunky pencil or crayon. It is the largest crayon, so this is bigger than the Azafran ones because it's a taller. But let's go ahead and color on this, and you can see for yourself how you think they are. Okay, this is our last one. So the pigment is very light. You're having to push fairly hard. It's like wax build up immediately. Let's switch to a different color so I'm not continuing that. There's supposed to be neon in color. Some of them are more neon than others. But they smear quite a bit, and then they leave little marks on the page. So if I want to get rid of that mark, you know, simply have to lift it off with my finger. But there's still a mark underneath it, so I don't know, you know, where that mark came from, but I'll just color it back in. When I did heat up the crayon, the fluorescent part, the neon part, went away. So that's why I mentioned that it was disappointing to use. So if you're just going to use a bit of neon on your page and you don't want to blend it or do anything else, you just want a spot of neon, that might be use for it. But yeah, it's not, certainly not bright. So they've got two greens here, so let's try one green. Very light in pigment. You can hardly almost see that. And that's the darker of the two greens. If I use the lighter green, it's like you're not even seeing it. Just go over it a bunch of times. It's just the yeah. So these ones definitely were not worth my $1.50 when compared to the Cra-Z-Arts that I bought at the same time. So the wax is just gooping up, if that's a art word. So I'm glad I didn't spend any more than $1.50 on these. It was fun to try them, but I guess you never know until you try something. Now, out of all the colors, this you would expect would be our darkest color, but this is the color I started with, so let's see if I can get a little bit of pigment on top of there. So it is letting me deposit some more on there. I'm kind of pushing hard. If you push too hard, it actually lifts up the pigment that was on there already. I'll show you trying to use a colorless blender to do a little bit of blending. I'll show you that it doesn't do real well, but we will try. It's just skating on top, and all it's doing is lifting up the wax and depositing it on to my blender and removing. So yeah, not what blending is supposed to be about. If we try the colorless blender on this side, it's basically pushing down on the paper and scraping the wax off, and the wax is going onto the tip of my blender pencil. And the wax doesn't brush off easily either. It's sticky, like it's now going back from the blender pencil back onto the page. So it's a sticky wax. It doesn't brush off. It likes to cling. So this wax is definitely tougher than, say, the wax over here. So that is all 8 brands of crayons. We've gone from having soy-based crayons, clay-based crayons, wax-based, plastic, wax, oil pastel type crayons, and super wax neon crayons. So I hope you found this entertaining and somewhat useful. I definitely think that crayons are fun, and it's a break from I normally only work with colored pencil, so it is a nice break to try a different medium. I haven't had much luck with alcohol markers, so I prefer water-based mediums. So when I'm not working with colored pencils and those, I may try and dabble a bit more in these. I have certainly been using the Bambino crayons in my coloring for a couple of years now, and I definitely will add a few of these others into my rotation, because some of them were definitely fun to use and surprising. So I think that it was definitely worth the exercise. I certainly know what I like and what I don't, but all of them kind of look pretty in their own way. I mean, these two kind of a little disappointing, and this one, which is a surprise because I would have expected more from Faber Castell, but that's okay. You win some, you lose some. Until the next time and the next video, I hope you have a creative week. I hope you're doing something fun with your art. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.